Okay, Boston takes a 3-0 lead in the NBA Finals. How did we get here? Let's start with a couple different things. I want to talk Tatum. I want to talk Luca and why the Celtics remind me of Glenn Ross. So we figured it wasn't a great matchup basketball-wise for Dallas. I think a lot of us felt that way. But I still felt with Luca and Kyrie going off, the offensive capabilities of what those two guys can do. And they went off last night in the box score. Kyrie had a terrific game. A lot was tasked on him with Luka fouling out, which of course we'll get to. So Kyrie responds. You could see from the beginning of the game, much more assertive, looking to attack. I mean, from the first possession. So that wasn't an issue at all. But I thought with the combination of those two guys and what they're capable of and the improved defense that we've been looking at as a major factor at the end of the regular season and carrying on through the playoffs, and the Boston stuff, the stuff that if you've watched the Celtics all season long, well, if you have Celtics fans that are friends of yours, where they're like, yeah, they're really, I mean, look, the stuff that Bill and I have talked about all year long about just those moments where you're like, what is up with these guys? Well, we got a full fourth quarter of it after a small sampling of it at the end of game two. But when I look at Dallas's problems, and there's a long list here, the others is one of the headlines. The others meaning if you look at the third, fourth, and fifth leading scorers for the Mavericks through the three games in the finals, they've combined for 29.7 points per game. Boston's others, depending on who that is, because there's like 4 or 5 guys you can pick from that group where Dallas can't. Boston's group is outscoring those three leading scorers by 20 points, almost 20 points a game. They're averaging 48. PJ Washington was Grayson Allen against the Thunder, hitting 47% of his threes, went for 25% against Minnesota. So you're like, okay, maybe he just had the bad shooting night because there were still looks. Boston, it's at 29%. And when I watch PJ, when I watch Derek Jones, Gafford's not somebody you're really going to be trusting to like give you something offensively, even though they tried that late in game two because Tatum's his primary defender. If they're not bringing Tatum up into the switch, it just looks like these guys are just uncomfortable and not even thinking about the rim. There's just a group of possessions where even if somebody else gets a catch, it's just like, I don't want anything to do with this. And then you factor in that Kleber's clearly hurt, not even thinking about shooting, which you've already touched on in game two. Dallas in the finals is now 28% overall from three, 37% on the regular season. They were searching last night big time. They played 11 guys in the first half. Gafford, who's been such a big part of this defensive resurgent in this kind of Dallas 2.0 version, he played 16 minutes last night. He played 14 minutes in the first game. So you could say, well, first game was kind of a blowout, but like he's just played 50 total minutes through 3 games. And it's clear that Kidd is just not trusting him the way he just wasn't either exploited or was just having better games, because I think his life was just a lot easier in a non-Boston matchup. If you look at Dallas's defense, before the finals, was actually only 7th overall in the playoffs at 111 points per 100 possessions. Now it's 8th through 3 games in the finals. The number's basically the same, but that's a massive departure from where they were at their last 15 games of the regular season, where they were number 1 in defense. You could say it's too small of a sample, but that's the thing that kept making you feel like you have to throw out the season-long stats from Dallas, which I still think is the right thing to do. But that number was like 5 points better at like 106. Now, you could even argue that their playoff number is lower because they faced the Clippers, although a diminished version, a terrific OKC offense, which still just didn't have enough around SGA, and then Minnesota that was in a majority of those games in the Western Conference Finals. So the resume of teams that they're facing are tougher than anybody else. So maybe that number is going to go down. But you factor in that they're also now collectively shooting way less from 3. I mean, these are just all a lot of problems that are all coming to a head in the NBA Finals. Okay, the Boston angle. If you remember Alec Baldwin's terrific monologue, they're sitting out there waiting to give you their money. That's what the Celtics do. And boy, did they try to do it in the fourth quarter. It was 85-70 after 3. At that point, Boston, at the start of the fourth quarter, after Derek White 3 and a timeout, it's 91-70. Boston has a 41-19 advantage in the second half. And then Boston invited Dallas back into this game because of the way they just somehow cannot help themselves from avoiding these offensive stretches where you're like, what are you guys doing? Here's a collection of my favorites. a Peyton Pritchard ISO jumper, granted late shot clock, a Jaylen Brown no dribble 3-point attempt with 8 seconds left on the shot clock, switched on to Lively. Another Peyton Pritchard ISO jumper where he tried to hit a step back against PJ Washington. Again, another late shot clock. Tatum had an ISO against Kyrie, and Kyrie actually held up terrific defensively, but it's that left elbow swing around, up and down. I don't even know if it was a fadeaway jumper or whatever it was. It was a flailing jumper that really had no chance. Jaylen Brown later on has a step back 3 against Luca with 9 seconds left on the shot clock. For whatever reason, he took that one. Horford travels, juggling the ball after Luca had fallen down, that play that we'll get to, so it was 5-on-4, and then Horford somehow travels. You've got a Jaylen Brown turnover in there. I mean, look, I could list the entire game log. I'm not going to do that for you. There was that Luca Jaylen Brown collision where, not on the 6th foul for Luca, it was a different one. The ball got loose, Tatum grabbed it, and then Drew Holiday decides to take a 3 that's not even close to like what you'd expect from him in his game with 15 seconds left on the shot clock. All right. It was possession after possession where they're either so determined to run down the clock that they didn't care about the look. But that's what I can't stand about all basketball at all levels, is really the way I should say it, where it's like, don't become so obsessed with running clock that you're just inviting yourself into these awful matchups or shot attempts. I don't think Pritchard decides to go, hey, boys, it's Pritchard time. So those shots, again, as I point out, late in the shot clock, but it just keeps happening over and over and over again. At one point, Dallas had gone on a 22-2 run. So from the 91-70 score, through all the stuff that I'm talking about here, it's 93-22. We're talking about a 22-2 Dallas run. Boston, from when it was 91-70 in 53 seconds, scored 2 points over the next 8 minutes. And when they got it to 93, they didn't score any points for 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Again, they're waiting to give you their money. I knew if I were a Dallas fan after game 2, I'd be like, they were terrible from 3. They were up 9, even though Boston was 6-30 from 3. And then they had that brutal stretch towards the end. This was almost the entire fourth quarter. There was also another step back 3 from Tatum later where he was trying to put the game away, where you're like, what is that? Now, Drew Holiday may have had the play of the game. Jaylen Brown hit a turnaround shot later. That was kind of game. But Drew Holiday at 92, when he made it 98-92, it was almost like he just thought, all right, enough of this shit. Drives baseline, throws a ridiculous pass. Derek White hits a 3. So Luca had fouled out at 4:12. On the Horford travel play that I mentioned, there was also another Horford turnover in there where he got a rebound and decided to bring the ball up by himself for whatever reason, then turned it over. So it's just unbelievable how great this offensive team is, how great they are defensively, how great all the stats are over and over and over again. And you're like, wait, if this team is this good, why do they do stuff like that for like 8 straight minutes when it's the difference between likely closing out your opponent with 1 more game to win and 4 more chances versus Dallas going, all right, we survived it. Historic comeback. It's 2-1. And Porzingis may or may not be coming back, building some confidence, all of that. Like that entire quarter is about 2 very divergent paths. And Boston just decided to put on one of the worst displays of offense that we've seen in the playoffs. So Luca is a big topic as well, because all of these things end up massive referendums on the biggest stars. So when he drives on Tatum at 93-87, he flops, goes into the baseline seats. It's 5-on-4. Luckily, they get the Horford travel, but that's a huge possession, obviously, in that moment. But Luca's so mad about not getting the call that he just hangs back. He fouls out at 4:12 when it's 93-90. I think it's a terrible decision with 5 fouls to put yourself at risk of trying to get a charge on kind of a scramble play where Tatum's bringing it up in transition. There's just not, even if you're going to get that call, you can't risk it being your 6th, where you're like, wait, I'll add to this. When I'm sitting at home, much like you're sitting at home watching that game, you're thinking, are they really going to foul out Luka? I think it's worth taking note of the times where you expect the conspiracy to lead towards one decision and then keeping track of the times of like, you know what? They fouled him out. They reviewed it. They went back and said, first of all, they called it. Second of all, they didn't overturn it to go, hey, let's just keep Luka in the game, see if you can extend the series. Keep track of the times the conspiracies do not win. You'd be surprised. He also yelled at the bench, swore at the bench, because Luka just cannot help himself, and then he ends up fouling out. So he's getting destroyed today. Windhorst lit him up on Van Pelt's show last night. It was pointed. It was aggressive. I would say it felt like a little bit too much when it became, hey, the winners are over there and he's going to have to figure this stuff out, because I think both things are true. We've talked about how much Luka is basically insufferable at times. I actually think he can play more against LA and OKC than he has in the finals. I think he toned it down a bit in Minnesota too, because they were in control of that series. So this isn't even the worst version of what I've seen from him in series prior. His defense in game 2 was atrocious. He had some defensive approaches in this game that were terrible. Drew Holiday just dribbles into a 3, and Luka's got him. There's no screen, and Luka just lets him take the 3. The end of the third quarter, the Jaylen Brown dunk to make it 85-70. It's Kyrie on Hauser. It's Kyrie on Jaylen, and Hauser has Luka on him. Hauser comes up to set the screen. Jaylen actually went early, and Luka doesn't even get into the screening action. He just hangs back just beyond the free throw line, and he doesn't even move. And Dallas had a smaller lineup out there for it. And then Jaylen finishes with the emphatic dunk on top of just the times he's getting torched in game 2 and all those different switches. So here's what I think is very fair about Luka. He complains way too much. It looked even worse last night as he's fouling out, because he can't do that. He's not good on defense, but against Minnesota, they did not have the personnel to take advantage of it the way Boston does, because Minnesota would always have people that you could cheat off of. Really the same thing with OKC. Like, all right, you can go ahead, and OKC couldn't hit any shots on top of everything else outside of SGA. But when it becomes, is he incapable of winning because of what happened last night in game 3? That's where I think it goes a little too far, because I would expect almost everyone would agree with this. The only reason the Mavericks are even in the NBA Finals is because of Luka. But a week removed from he's the best player in the world, knowing that he would be anointed the best player in the world, you would feel like an idiot still saying Jokic is the best player in the world if Luka were to pull this off. 2, now is he wired the wrong way? That's where I think it's too much, despite all of the criticism being fair and coming to, like, this is part of the finals too, where it's like more people are watching and really paying attention, which is very different from those of us, you listening, me talking on the pod about like how much we watch these guys all the time. Like, yeah, we knew this, we saw this, but Boston, because of the way they stretch you out, exploits it much more. Because the finals just ends up, and now we have to like reclassify everybody, although we may have the first finals non-belt transfer in a long time, because Luka's not going to be allowed to have it, and not saying he deserves it. The funny thing will be like what happens with Tatum. Because if Tatum had played better in the first couple games and they're up 3-0, and say he's on track to win a finals MVP, which he's not, I would imagine Jaylen is going to win it. If this is a series that's, say Dallas gets game 4, Boston goes home, wins game 5, like we don't have we'd have to have a shift from what we've had based on production so far for Brown to not win finals MVP. And you could argue his turnaround shot late last night is really the one that sealed it, more so than the Derek White 3 off of the Drew Holiday pass. But it might be kind of refreshing that we could have a finals outcome where you're not going, well, now what do we do with Tatum? Like, I don't know. I would keep him in the same place. I think he's awesome. I thought he was worse than other people did in game 2. Maybe it was because I was there. Maybe you saw something different on TV. I thought he was a guy that was in between decisions as an offensive player who's the primary option, and that's a scary place to be because he just had lost his confidence. I do not understand the step-back threes. I'll never understand this. It doesn't go in enough. You're settling, and you're letting the defense off the hook. But now we have Luka where maybe it just gets really nasty if they were to get swept, which I don't think I'm going to do. I just don't, because I'd be like, okay, these are the limitations that I knew about him. And by the way, the rest of the guys aren't doing anything. And Kyrie hadn't really done much in games 1 and 2. So it'll be a departure from the normal routine post-finals of like, okay, we have a result. How good is this team? How disappointing is the other team? What do they need to do to fix it? And let's talk about the stars. Where can we slide them in the top 10 rankings? And I'd argue they're probably going to stay in the same place for me before the finals even started.